The DNA vial sits under laboratory light, no bigger than a thumb. Inside, invisible yet eternal, lives evidence from 1982. Across town, Detective Dana Kroom opens a file folder marked Prosser, Kelly Ann. The pages are yellowed, the photos faded, but the question burns fresh. Who killed an 8-year-old girl walking home from school? For 38 years, Columbus, Ohio, lived with that silence. Parents changed their routines, children learned new fears. Investigators carried the weight of empty answers. Then science spoke what memory could not. A name emerged from genetic shadows: Harold Warren Jarrell, dead since 1996. Revealed as the predator who walked free among them. This is not a story of swift justice. It is the echo of time, how a preserved sample became a voice, how decades of grief found meaning, and how a community learned that truth can survive, even death. In the end, Kelly Ann Prosser would solve her own murder, speaking through evidence that outlived everyone who failed to protect her. Before we get into the story, drop a comment with your country and the time. Right now, September 20, 1982. Morning sunlight cuts through the University District of Columbus, painting sidewalks gold where children walk to school. Kelly Ann Prosser adjusts her backpack straps, her blonde hair catching the light. At 8 years old, she carries the easy confidence of a child who believes the world is safe. Come straight home, her mother calls from the doorway. Kelly waves over her shoulder, already focused on the day ahead. The short walk home through familiar streets, where neighbors know her name. The University District breathes with academic calm. Tree-lined streets, faculty families, graduate students with coffee cups and heavy books. This is the kind of neighborhood where parents don't worry, where children ride bikes until dark and doors stay unlocked. By noon, Kelly sits in her classroom, raising her hand for reading comprehension. By 3 o'clock, she walks through the school doors into afternoon warmth. The day feels ordinary, unremarkable. She turns toward home, following North High Street through the heart of her safe world. 4 o'clock passes, then 5. Kelly's mother checks the window, expecting to see her daughter's familiar figure appearing around the corner. Instead, she finds empty sidewalks and growing shadows. At 6 o'clock, she calls the school. Kelly left on time. She calls neighbors. No one has seen her. The safe world begins to crack as evening settles over Columbus. By 7 o'clock, police cars arrive with flashing lights, transforming the quiet street into something else entirely. Night falls over the University District, like a weight. Police command post lights illuminate the parking lot of Indianola Elementary, as officers spread maps across car hoods. Radio chatter fills the air. Search teams, helicopter coordinates, neighborhood canvas reports. Kelly's mother sits in a folding chair, clutching a recent school photo. Her daughter's smile beams up from the glossy paper, frozen in innocence. Detectives approach with clipboards and gentle voices, asking questions that transform a missing child into a case file. Last time you saw her? This morning, 7:30. She was excited about a book report. Any strangers in the neighborhood recently? No, nothing unusual. This is a safe place, but safety is already dissolving. Officers knock on doors with Kelly's photo, asking residents to search their garages, basements, any place a frightened child might hide. The answers come back negative. No one saw Kelly after school. No unusual vehicles, no screams or struggles. Local news vans arrive as darkness deepens. Kelly's face appears on evening broadcasts, her school picture projected into living rooms across central Ohio. The anchor's voice carries careful urgency. 8-year-old Kelly Ann Prosser, missing since this afternoon. Phone lines at police headquarters light up with tips, possible sightings, vehicle descriptions. Well-meaning neighbors reporting suspicious activity that suddenly seems sinister. Each call feeds into a growing system of hope and desperation. The search expands beyond the neighborhood. Officers with flashlights comb through Indianola Park, checking behind trees and playground equipment. Others drive slowly through adjacent areas, scanning alleys and parking lots. The helicopter circles overhead, its spotlight sweeping the ground below. As midnight approaches, the truth settles over the command post. This is no longer a missing child case. This has become something darker. September 22, 1982. 2 days of searching end in Madison County farmland, 20 miles from Columbus. A farmer walking his property notices something wrong in the corn stalks bent unnaturally. Disturbed earth, a flash of color that doesn't belong. Crime scene tape flutters in the morning breeze as detectives arrive. The coroner's van idles nearby. Photographers document everything: the position of the body, scattered clothing, footprints in soft soil. Kelly Ann Prosser has been found, but the finding brings no relief. The medical examiner works with clinical precision: sexual assault, blunt force trauma, strangulation. The autopsy reveals a child who fought for her life before losing it. More importantly for the investigation, biological evidence is recovered and preserved. In 1982, DNA analysis doesn't exist, but the evidence is carefully stored in the hope that science will someday catch up. News of Kelly's death spreads through Columbus like a shockwave. The University District, once proud of its safety, becomes a neighborhood of locked doors and accompanied children. Parents who let their kids walk to school now drive them personally. The easy trust of suburban life has been shattered. Kelly's funeral fills a church beyond capacity. Her classmates sit in the front rows, confusion written on their young faces. Teachers struggle to explain evil to children who believed the world was good. The entire city grieves for a girl they never knew, but somehow loved. Detectives return to the crime scene repeatedly, searching for clues that might lead to Kelly's killer. They find shoe impressions, tire tracks, evidence of a struggle, but they find no witnesses, no clear suspect, no obvious path to justice. The biological evidence goes into refrigerated storage at the police laboratory. Unknown to anyone at the time, those preserved samples will wait nearly 40 years to speak their truth. Police headquarters buzzes with activity as detectives interview known sex offenders within a 50-mile radius. Mugshots line the walls of the conference room. Criminal histories spread across tables. Each name represents possibility and dread. Could this be Kelly's killer? The interviews yield nothing. Alibis check out. Stories remain consistent under repeated questioning. Polygraph tests show no deception. One by one, suspects are eliminated, leaving investigators with empty hands and growing frustration. Public pressure intensifies. City council meetings become forums for angry parents demanding answers. Local newspapers run daily updates, keeping Kelly's story on front pages. The mayor calls for additional resources. The police chief promises results that seem increasingly unlikely. Detectives canvass the University District again, this time with enhanced focus. They map Kelly's exact route from school, timing the walk down to the minute. They interview bus drivers, store clerks, anyone who might have been present during those crucial afternoon hours. The investigation generates hundreds of reports and zero breakthrough moments. Evidence technicians examine Kelly's belongings with microscopic precision. Her backpack yields no foreign fingerprints. Her clothing provides no unusual fibers. The crime scene offers physical evidence but no identity to attach it to. In the laboratory, the preserved biological samples undergo every test available. In 1982, blood typing provides basic information but lacks the specificity needed for identification. The samples go back into storage, awaiting technological advances that may never come. As weeks turn to months, the investigation enters a different phase. Hot leads become cold possibilities. Daily briefings become weekly updates. The intense focus of immediate crisis gives way to the steady persistence of unsolved mystery. Kelly's case file grows thicker with each passing month, filled with witness statements, evidence logs, and investigative dead ends. Unknown to everyone involved, the answer lies preserved in a small vial, waiting for science to evolve. Years dissolve into memory as Kelly's case settles into the cold file archives. Detectives retire, taking their theories and hunches with them. New investigators inherit the burden, reading through accumulated reports, learning Kelly's story secondhand. The University District adapts to its new reality. Parents develop different routines. Children grow up knowing about the girl who didn't come home. Kelly's name becomes part of the neighborhood's collective memory, spoken in warnings, remembered in precautions. Kelly's mother maintains contact with the police department, sending Christmas cards with family updates, birthday reminders that Kelly would have been 9, 10, 15, 21. Her correspondence becomes an annual ritual of hope and heartbreak. Local news stations run anniversary stories. Kelly Ann Prosser, 5 years later, then 10 years, then 15. Each report rehashes the same facts, interviews the same detectives, asks the same unanswered questions. Public interest wanes and resurges in cycles, driven by other crimes and other mysteries. True crime enthusiasts discover Kelly's case through internet forums and amateur detective websites. They analyze evidence, photos, debate theories, propose solutions that investigators have already considered and dismissed. Their attention brings new energy, but no new answers. The biological evidence remains in storage, untouched by time, but also untouched by progress. DNA technology exists by the 1990s, but old cases compete with new crimes for laboratory resources. Kelly's samples wait in line behind fresh evidence from active investigations. Detectives occasionally revisit the file, hoping fresh eyes might see what previous investigators missed. They re-interview witnesses whose memories have changed with time. They follow new tips that lead to familiar dead ends. The case resists solution, like a locked door without a key. As the millennium approaches, Kelly Ann Prosser becomes a symbol of unsolved crime, a reminder that justice sometimes fails, that evil sometimes escapes, that some questions remain forever unanswered. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation Laboratory processes Kelly's preserved biological evidence through CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System. Technicians extract genetic profiles from samples stored for 32 years, hoping for a match against convicted offenders in the national database. The computer searches through millions of profiles. Hours pass as algorithms compare genetic markers, looking for the combination that will finally give Kelly's killer a name. The process completes with disappointing results. No match found. The negative result stings investigators who had hoped technology would provide the breakthrough they needed. The DNA profile exists, clear, definitive, unique to Kelly's killer, but it belongs to someone not in the system. Either the perpetrator has never been convicted of a crime requiring DNA submission, or he died before database collection began. Cold case detectives study the genetic profile like a roadmap to nowhere. They know everything about the killer's DNA, and nothing about his identity. Science has given them a fingerprint for a ghost. Online communities dedicated to unsolved crimes discover Kelly's case through public records requests. Amateur genealogists and true crime enthusiasts create websites dedicated to her memory. They share theories, analyze evidence photos, and keep her story alive in digital spaces. The DNA profile gets entered into additional databases as they become available. State systems, regional networks, international repositories. Each submission carries the same hope and produces the same result: no match found. Kelly's mother continues her annual correspondence with police, now addressing a new generation of detectives who know her daughter's case only through files. Her letters carry the weight of decades, the accumulated grief of birthdays not celebrated, and holidays marked by absence. The biological evidence returns to storage, its secrets intact. Technology has evolved enough to read the DNA, but not enough to identify its source. Kelly's killer remains anonymous, hidden in plain sight somewhere within the genetic landscape of humanity. Detective Dana Kroom opens Kelly's file in the Columbus Division of Police Cold Case Unit. The folder has grown thick over 38 years: witness statements, evidence logs, investigative reports, and annual updates that chronicle decades of dead ends. Kroom has built her career on impossible cases, on evidence that others have given up on. She approaches Kelly's file with fresh eyes and new tools. Genetic genealogy has revolutionized cold case work, turning DNA profiles into family trees, anonymous killers into named suspects. She contacts Advanced DNA, a laboratory specializing in forensic genealogy. The preserved biological evidence from 1982 gets shipped to their facility, where analysts combine traditional forensic science with cutting-edge genealogical research. The process begins with extracting a clean DNA profile from the evidence. 38 years of storage have not degraded the sample. Cold storage has preserved the genetic material, like a time capsule. The profile shows clear markers, distinct patterns that belong to one specific individual. Genealogists upload the profile to public ancestry databases, searching for genetic relatives of Kelly's killer. The initial results show distant cousins, third and fourth generation relatives, whose family trees might eventually lead to the perpetrator. Building a family tree from DNA requires patience and precision. Analysts trace branches backward through generations, following marriage records, birth certificates, and census data. Each connection narrows the possibilities. Each generation brings them closer to a name. The work takes months. Genealogists contact potential relatives, explaining their research without revealing the criminal context. They gather DNA samples from willing participants, comparing genetic markers to refine their family trees. Slowly, the branches converge toward a single point: Harold Warren Jarrell, a man who died in Las Vegas in 1996. The genealogical evidence points to him with increasing certainty, but confirmation requires additional investigation. Detective Kroom begins researching Jarrell's background, uncovering a criminal history that makes the DNA evidence even more compelling. The search for Harold Warren Jarrell's genetic relatives takes investigators across multiple states. Family members, unaware of the criminal investigation, provide DNA samples for what they believe is genealogical research. Each sample refines the family tree, bringing scientists closer to certainty. Advanced DNA analysts work with the precision of archaeologists, excavating genetic connections from saliva samples and family records. They map relationships across generations, following bloodlines through marriage records and birth certificates. The work is painstaking, methodical, and ultimately conclusive. Third cousins in Michigan provide samples that confirm the family line. Distant relatives in Pennsylvania contribute genetic material that strengthens the connection. Each DNA test eliminates other possibilities while reinforcing Jarrell's link to the crime scene evidence. The genealogical investigation reveals Jarrell's family history, a scattered clan across the Midwest with no knowledge of his criminal activities. Relatives remember him as a quiet man who kept to himself, worked occasionally, and never stayed in one place very long. Detective Kroom coordinates with genealogists as the evidence mounts. Jarrell's genetic profile aligns with the crime scene DNA within scientific certainty. The probability of error shrinks to 1 in billions, a statistical guarantee that Harold Warren Jarrell killed Kelly Ann Prosser, but genetic genealogy provides only identification, not explanation. Investigators must now reconstruct Jarrell's life in 1982, understanding how he encountered Kelly and why he chose her as a victim. Public records show Jarrell worked at a Columbus radio station in 1982, living in an apartment just 5 miles from Kelly's school. His employment records place him in the city during the exact time frame of her disappearance. The geographic connection transforms genetic possibility into investigative certainty. The family tree research concludes with unanimous scientific agreement. Harold Warren Jarrell murdered Kelly Ann Prosser on September 20, 1982. Now Detective Kroom must uncover the criminal history that explains how such a predator walked free among children. Columbus Police Archives reveal Harold Warren Jarrell's disturbing criminal history. In 1977, he was convicted of abducting an 8-year-old child in another Ohio jurisdiction. Court records show he served a reduced sentence and was released on parole in early 1982, just 8 months before Kelly's murder. The revelation stuns investigators. A known child predator was released from prison and immediately offended again, this time committing murder. The system designed to protect children had instead enabled their destruction. Detective Kroom reviews Jarrell's parole records, finding minimal supervision and no ongoing monitoring. In 1982, sex offender registration didn't exist. GPS tracking was science fiction. Convicted predators simply returned to society, with promises to behave and little oversight to ensure compliance. Jarrell's 1977 conviction involved the attempted abduction of a child walking home from school, the exact same circumstances as Kelly's disappearance. The pattern is undeniable, the connection impossible to ignore. His earlier crime was a rehearsal for Kelly's murder. Investigators contact the 1977 victim, now an adult. She remembers Jarrell clearly, a nondescript man who approached her on the street, attempted to lure her into his car, and fled when she screamed. Her escape likely saved her life and provided law enforcement with their only conviction against Jarrell. Employment records show Jarrell worked at Wosu radio station during 1982, giving him legitimate reasons to be in the University District. His job required him to drive through Kelly's neighborhood regularly, providing opportunities to observe potential victims and plan attacks. Witnesses from 1982 remember seeing Jarrell in the area, though his presence seemed unremarkable at the time. He blended into the academic community, appearing harmless, while harboring deadly intentions. The criminal history provides context for the DNA evidence, transforming scientific certainty into investigative understanding. Harold Warren Jarrell wasn't a random killer. He was a predator who had struck before and would likely have struck again if death hadn't stopped him. 1982. Neighborhood canvas reports, revisited after nearly 4 decades, place Harold Warren Jarrell near Kelly's school on multiple occasions. Witnesses describe a man matching his description, driving slowly through residential streets, behavior that seemed merely odd until viewed through the lens of criminal intent. His vehicle registration from 1982 shows a brown sedan that neighbors noticed but couldn't identify. The car appeared frequently enough to become familiar without raising suspicion, a predator hiding in plain sight through the simple act of appearing normal. Jarrell's work schedule at the radio station required morning and afternoon drives through the University District. His route took him past Indianola Elementary during arrival and dismissal times, providing regular opportunities to observe children's routines and identify potential victims. Detective Kroom interviews surviving witnesses who remember the fall of 1982, through decades, still hold fragments of truth. Several recall seeing Jarrell's car parked near the school, its driver appearing to wait for something or someone. The randomness of Kelly's selection becomes clear through investigation. Jarrell didn't know her personally, she was simply a child who walked alone at a predictable time along a route he traveled regularly. Her murder was opportunistic, committed by a predator who recognized vulnerability and acted upon it. Analysis of Jarrell's movements reveals no direct connection to Kelly's family. He lived in a different part of Columbus, worked in a different industry, and moved in different social circles. Their paths crossed only in the moments leading to her death. The lack of personal connection explains why the original investigation found no obvious suspects. Jarrell appeared in no witness statements because he was essentially invisible, a predator who had learned to blend into normal society while harboring abnormal intentions. His criminal history from 1977 provides the key to understanding his methods. He had practiced child abduction, learned from his mistakes, and refined his approach. Kelly's murder represented the escalation of his criminal behavior, from attempted abduction to completed murder. Columbus Division of Police Laboratory confirms the final DNA analysis. Harold Warren Jarrell's genetic profile matches the preserved biological evidence with absolute scientific certainty. 38 years after Kelly's murder, her killer, finally, has a name. The confirmation process involves multiple laboratories and independent analysis. Each test produces identical results. The DNA evidence points unequivocally to Jarrell as Kelly's killer. The statistical probability of error is so small as to be negligible. Advanced DNA analysts prepare their final report, documenting the genealogical research and genetic comparisons that led to Jarrell's identification. The report will become part of Kelly's permanent case file, providing closure to the longest unsolved murder in Columbus Division of Police history. Detective Kroom reviews the accumulated evidence one final time before moving forward with public announcement. DNA analysis, criminal history, geographic connections, employment records, witness statements. Everything points to Harold Warren Jarrell as Kelly's killer. The ethical implications of naming a deceased suspect generate careful discussion within the police department. Jarrell cannot be prosecuted, cannot defend himself, cannot face justice in any traditional sense. But his identification serves other purposes: closure for Kelly's family, resolution for investigators, and validation of DNA technology's potential. Legal counsel confirms that police can publicly identify Jarrell without legal risk. Death ends the possibility of prosecution, but not the pursuit of truth. Kelly's family deserves to know her killer's name, even if they cannot see him punished. The Columbus Division of Police schedules a press conference to announce the breakthrough. After decades of silence, Kelly Ann Prosser's case will finally be resolved through the power of preserved evidence and evolving science. Detective Kroom prepares her remarks, knowing that this announcement will bring both closure and sorrow to everyone who has waited for answers. Justice delayed is not justice denied, it is justice that required science to catch up with truth. Columbus Division of Police headquarters fills with reporters, city officials, and community members for the announcement that will close Kelly Ann Prosser's case after 38 years. Detective Dana Kroom approaches the podium with Kelly's file in hand, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. Today, we can announce that the murder of Kelly Ann Prosser has been solved, she begins. Through advances in DNA technology and genetic genealogy, we have identified her killer as Harold Warren Jarrell, who died in Las Vegas in 1996. The room erupts with questions. How was the identification made? Why did it take so long? What does this mean for other cold cases? Detective Kroom addresses each inquiry with professional calm, explaining the scientific process that finally gave Kelly's case resolution. She describes the genealogical investigation, the DNA analysis, and Jarrell's criminal history, the 1977 conviction for child abduction, his release just months before Kelly's murder, his presence in her neighborhood during the exact time frame of her disappearance. The assembled media captures every word, knowing they are witnessing history. Columbus Division of Police has solved their oldest unsolved murder through technology that didn't exist when the crime was committed. Kelly's voice has finally been heard across nearly 4 decades of silence. Kelly's family issues a statement through police spokesperson. We are grateful to finally Know the name of the person who took Kelly from us. While we cannot see him prosecuted, we have the peace of knowing he can never hurt another child. The announcement generates national attention as news outlets report on the breakthrough. Kelly's story becomes a symbol of technological advancement, investigative persistence, and the possibility that even the oldest mysteries can find resolution. Detective Kroom concludes the press conference with a promise. This case shows that no matter how much time passes, we never stop seeking justice for victims and answers for families. Kelly's mother sits in her living room, surrounded by decades of memories that suddenly feel different. The man who killed her daughter now has a name, Harold Warren Jarrell, and that knowledge changes everything while changing nothing at all. The phone rings constantly with calls from reporters, friends, and family members who have followed Kelly's case for 38 years. Everyone wants to know how she feels, what this means, whether she finally has peace. The answers are complicated, layered with grief that DNA evidence cannot heal. "I used to imagine what I would do if they caught him," she tells a local reporter. "Now I know there's nothing to do except be grateful that someone cared enough to keep trying." Her voice carries the weight of decades spent waiting for answers that arrived too late for revenge, but not too late for one. Truth. The preserved evidence that solved Kelly's case sits in the police laboratory, no longer needed for investigation but retained as proof of science's power to resurrect voices from the past. The small vial represents more than DNA. It holds Kelly's ability to identify her own killer across the barrier of death. Kelly's mother receives copies of the final investigative report, including details about Jarrell's criminal history and his presence in their neighborhood during 1982. Reading about her daughter's killer brings both clarity and horror. Clarity about what happened, horror about how it could have been prevented. Community members express relief that Kelly's killer has been identified, but also anger that he escaped earthly justice. Social media fills with comments about Jarrell, his criminal history, and the system failures that allowed him to walk free after his 1977 conviction. The DNA evidence that remained silent for 38 years has finally spoken, proving that truth can survive even when justice cannot. Kelly Ann Prosser solved her own murder through evidence that outlasted everyone who failed to protect her during life. Detective Dana Kroom returns to her office in the Columbus Division of Police Cold Case Unit, where Kelly's file now rests in the closed drawer. The thick folder represents 38 years of investigation, thousands of hours of work, and countless investigators who refuse to give up. She opens the file one last time, reviewing the journey from September 1982 to the present moment. Crime scene photos, witness statements, laboratory reports, DNA analysis. The paper trail documents not just a murder investigation, but the evolution of forensic science itself. A handwritten note tucked inside the folder catches her attention, a message from a previous detective. "For Kelly Ann, we found him." The simple words capture the promise that drove every investigator who worked this case, the commitment that transcended individual careers and personal limitations. Other cold cases line Detective Kroom's walls, each representing families still waiting for answers. Kelly's resolution provides hope for these unsolved mysteries while demonstrating the potential of preserved evidence and advancing technology. The Columbus Division of Police has established new protocols for evidence preservation based on lessons learned from Kelly's case. Future investigations will benefit from improved storage methods and faster DNA processing, potentially preventing other families from waiting decades for closure. Detective Kroom reflects on the role of time in criminal justice. 38 years allowed Jarrell to escape prosecution, but also allowed science to evolve enough to identify him. The same passage of time that frustrated justice also enabled resolution. Kelly's case has generated renewed funding for cold case investigations and DNA analysis. Politicians and police administrators recognize the value of persistence and technology in solving seemingly impossible crimes. The small DNA vial that revealed Jarrell's identity remains in evidence storage, a symbol of science's power to preserve truth until technology can interpret it. Kelly's voice, silent for decades, has finally been heard. Media outlets across Ohio report on Kelly's case resolution, with journalists examining the implications for other unsolved murders. Television news programs feature interviews with forensic genealogists, DNA experts, and cold case investigators who explain how science has revolutionized criminal justice. National news networks pick up the story, presenting Kelly's case as an example of technological advancement and investigative persistence. Her photograph appears on screens across the country, introducing her story to audiences who never knew her name but understand her significance. True crime podcasts dedicate episodes to Kelly's case, analyzing the investigation timeline and discussing the role of genetic genealogy in solving cold cases. Her story reaches new audiences through digital platforms, ensuring her memory extends beyond Central Ohio. Crime analysis experts use Kelly's case as a teaching tool, demonstrating how preserved evidence can provide resolution decades after the original investigation. Law enforcement agencies study the Columbus approach as a model for their own cold case units. Public interest in genetic genealogy surges following Kelly's case announcement. Ancestry websites report increased membership as people become curious about their own family trees, unaware that their genetic information might someday help solve crimes. Privacy advocates raise concerns about law enforcement access to genetic databases, arguing that consumers who submit DNA for genealogical research never consented to criminal investigation. The debate highlights tensions between public safety and personal privacy in the digital age. Kelly's case influences legislation regarding evidence preservation and cold case funding. State lawmakers introduce bills requiring longer retention periods for biological evidence and increased resources for DNA analysis of unsolved crimes. The university district where Kelly lived has changed dramatically since 1982, but her memory persists in community conversations about child safety and stranger danger. Parents still use her story to teach children about caution while hoping such lessons never become necessary. Advanced DNA Laboratory hosts a forensic conference where Kelly's case serves as the centerpiece presentation. Scientists, law enforcement officials, and legal experts gather to examine how genetic genealogy solved a 38-year-old murder. The presentation details the methodical process of building family trees from DNA evidence, tracing genetic connections across generations to identify Harold Warren Jarrell. Attendees learn about the precision required to connect biological evidence to a specific individual among millions of potential relatives. Forensic genealogists explain the ethical considerations involved in their work, balancing family privacy with criminal justice, obtaining consent for DNA collection, and maintaining scientific objectivity throughout the investigation process. The conference generates enthusiasm for applying similar techniques to other cold cases. Law enforcement agencies request training in genetic genealogy methods, hoping to resolve their own unsolved murders. Through DNA analysis and family tree research, Kelly's preserved biological evidence, collected in 1982, becomes a symbol of foresight in evidence preservation. Conference attendees examine storage protocols that kept the DNA viable for nearly 4 decades, learning lessons applicable to current investigations. The original evidence collection vial remains intact in police storage, a testament to proper handling and preservation techniques. Crime scene technicians from 1982 unknowingly provided the key to solving Kelly's murder through their careful evidence documentation. Scientific presentations at the conference emphasize the importance of patience in cold case work. Kelly's resolution required not just advanced technology, but also decades of careful evidence preservation and persistent investigation. The conference concludes with discussions about future technological advances that might solve currently impossible cases. Today's unsolved murders may find resolution through scientific methods not yet invented, just as Kelly's case was solved through techniques unavailable in 1982. Her story demonstrates that evidence preservation is an investment in future justice, ensuring that truth remains available when technology evolves enough to interpret it. Kelly's family prepares a public statement expressing gratitude to everyone who worked on her case over 38 years. The statement acknowledges the pain of knowing her killer's name, while recognizing the peace that comes with finally having answers. Kelly was 8 years old when she was taken from us. The statement begins, "Today, she would be 46. We have lived with questions for 38 years, and now we finally have the answer. Harold Warren Jarrell killed our daughter, and we are grateful to know his name." The family thanks Detective Dana Kroom and the Columbus Division of Police Cold Case Unit for their persistence and dedication. They acknowledge the advanced DNA analysts whose scientific work provided the breakthrough that seemed impossible for decades. Their statement includes appreciation for the community support that sustained them through years of uncertainty. Neighbors, friends, and strangers who kept Kelly's memory alive shared her story and never stopped hoping for resolution. The family expresses mixed emotions about Gerald's death in 1996. While they cannot see him prosecuted, they find comfort in knowing he can never hurt another child. His identification provides closure even without traditional justice. Media outlets broadcast the family statement, allowing Kelly's loved ones to speak directly to the public that has followed her story. Their words carry dignity, gratitude, and the strength that comes from surviving decades of uncertainty. The statement concludes with hope that Kelly's case will inspire continued efforts to solve other cold cases. If science could find Kelly's killer, after 38 years, maybe other families won't have to wait as long for answers. Kelly's family retreats from public attention, following the statement, preferring to process their emotions privately. They have lived in the spotlight of unsolved crime for decades. Now, they seek the quiet peace that comes with resolution. Columbus Division of Police launches a community awareness initiative focused on child safety and cold case resolution. Kelly's story becomes the foundation for educational programs that teach parents and children about personal security while demonstrating the value of persistent investigation. Detective Dana Kroom speaks at schools and community centers, explaining how modern forensic science solved Kelly's 38-year-old murder. Her presentations balance hope with realism, showing that justice can arrive even after decades of waiting. The awareness campaign generates new tips for other unsolved cases, as community members recall suspicious activities from years past. Kelly's resolution inspires people to share information they had previously dismissed as unimportant. Child safety workshops use Kelly's case as a teaching example, without exploiting her tragedy. Instructors emphasize stranger awareness and communication with parents, while avoiding fear-based messaging that might harm children's development. Parents attending the workshops learn about modern safety technologies, GPS tracking, cell phone monitoring, and communication apps that didn't exist in 1982. Kelly's story illustrates how both crime and prevention methods have evolved over 4 decades. The initiative includes information about DNA, evidence, preservation, and the importance of reporting crimes promptly. Community members learn how proper evidence collection in 1982 enabled Kelly's case resolution in 2020. Local law enforcement agencies observe increased cooperation from witnesses and crime victims following Kelly's case. Announcement: the demonstration of long-term investigative commitment encourages people to trust police with sensitive information. Cold case tip lines experience significant increases in activity, as Kelly's resolution proves that old cases can still be solved. Citizens report information about decades-old crimes, hoping to provide the missing piece that might resolve another family's long wait for answers. The Community Awareness Initiative extends beyond crime prevention to include education about genetic genealogy and its role in modern justice. Columbus Police Department Awards ceremony recognizes Detective Dana Kroom and the Cold Case Unit for their work on Kelly's case. The auditorium fills with law enforcement officials, community leaders, and citizens who have followed the investigation for decades. Chief of Police presents awards for outstanding investigation and scientific innovation. The recognition acknowledges not just the successful resolution of Kelly's case, but also the development of new investigative techniques that can be applied to other cold cases. Detective Kroom accepts the award on behalf of all investigators who worked Kelly's case over 38 years. Her speech honors retired detectives, crime scene technicians, and laboratory analysts whose contributions made the final resolution possible. The ceremony includes a moment of silence for Kelly Ann Prosser, acknowledging that awards and recognition cannot restore the life that was lost. The focus remains on honoring her memory, while celebrating the persistence that finally gave her case closure. Advanced DNA representatives attend the ceremony, accepting recognition for their scientific work that provided the breakthrough. Their genetic genealogy techniques have revolutionized cold case investigation, offering hope to families who had given up on justice. The award ceremony generates media coverage that spreads awareness about cold case investigations and DNA technology. Other police departments observe Columbus methods, adapting similar approaches for their own unsolved cases. Statistical reports presented at the ceremony reveal that over 50 additional cold cases have been reopened using techniques developed during Kelly's investigation. The genetic genealogy approach has proven effective across multiple crime types and time periods. The ceremony concludes with commitment to continued cold case work. Kelly's resolution demonstrates that no case is too old, no evidence too degraded, no mystery too complex for modern investigative science combined with human persistence. Kelly's photograph displays prominently throughout the ceremony, reminding attendees that behind every successful investigation lies a victim whose voice finally found expression through preserved evidence and dedicated work. Detective Dana Kroom files Kelly's case in the permanent archives, closing the investigation that defined her career and changed her understanding of justice. The thick folder joins other solved cases, but its significance extends beyond personal accomplishment to represent hope for families still waiting. She writes a final case note, documenting lessons learned from Kelly's investigation, the importance of evidence preservation, the value of technological advancement, and the necessity of never abandoning hope for resolution. Future investigators will read these observations and apply them to their own impossible cases. The small DNA vial that revealed Harold Warren Jarrell's identity remains in evidence storage, no longer needed for investigation but retained as proof of science's power to preserve truth across decades. Its presence reminds investigators that today's unsolved cases may find resolution through tomorrow's technological advances. Kelly's case file includes correspondence from her mother spanning 38 years, Christmas cards, birthday reminders, and annual letters asking for updates. These documents chronicle a family's suffer-quartered its endurance and demonstrate the human cost of unsolved crime. Detective Kroom reflects on the paradox of Kelly's resolution. Justice arrived too late to punish the guilty, but not too late to provide truth to the innocent. The distinction between punishment and closure has shaped her understanding of what cold case investigation can and cannot achieve. Other unsolved cases await attention on Detective Kroom's desk, each representing families experiencing their own version of Kelly's mother's long wait. The successful resolution of Kelly's case provides both inspiration and pressure to solve these remaining mysteries. The Columbus Division of Police Cold Case Unit has gained national recognition following Kelly's case, attracting federal funding and scientific partnerships that will benefit future investigations. Her tragedy has become the foundation for preventing other families from enduring similar decades of uncertainty. University District residents gather in the park, where Kelly once played, organizing a memorial ceremony that honors her memory while celebrating the resolution of her case. Candles flicker in the evening air as community members share stories about how her death changed their neighborhood. Parents who lived through 1982 speak about the fear that gripped their community and the gradual healing that followed Kelly's case resolution. Their children, now adults with families of their own, learn how one tragedy shaped an entire generation's approach to child safety. Kelly's former classmates, now approaching 50, attend the memorial with their own children. They remember an 8-year-old girl who loved books and always raised her hand in class, sharing memories that restore humanity to a story dominated by evidence and investigation. The memorial includes recognition of everyone who worked Kelly's case over 38 years: police officers, laboratory technicians, forensic analysts, and community volunteers who never stopped. Believing that answers would eventually emerge, a small plaque is installed near the memorial site with Kelly's name and dates, ensuring that future generations will remember her story. The inscription reads simply, "Kelly Ann Prosser, remembered always, justice finally served." Local children participate in the ceremony, learning about Kelly's story in age-appropriate ways that emphasize community safety without creating fear. Their presence represents hope that future generations will grow up in neighborhoods where such tragedies become increasingly rare. The memorial ceremony generates renewed discussion about child protection policies and community awareness programs. Kelly's legacy extends beyond her individual case to influence how society approaches child safety and criminal justice. Evening shadows fall across the memorial site. As participants prepare to leave, Kelly's story has finally reached its conclusion, but her impact on the community will continue for generations of families who benefit from lessons learned through her tragedy. Local television station produces a documentary examining Kelly's case from investigation to resolution, interviewing key figures who worked the case across 4 decades. The program provides comprehensive coverage of how genetic genealogy solved a seemingly impossible crime. Retired detectives share memories of the original investigation, describing the frustration of following leads that led nowhere, and the commitment to never giving up, despite repeated disappointments. Their interviews reveal the personal cost of carrying unsolved cases throughout law enforcement careers. Advanced DNA scientists explain the technical process of genetic genealogy, making complex science accessible to general audiences. Their segment demonstrates how family trees constructed from DNA evidence can identify criminals decades after their crimes. Kelly's former neighbors and classmates contribute interviews that humanize the victim beyond police reports and evidence files. Their memories restore Kelly's identity as a real child, with hopes and dreams cut short by senseless violence. The documentary includes footage from the 2020 press conference, where Detective Dana Kroom announced Jarrell's identification, capturing the moment when 38 years of questions finally received answers. The emotional weight of that announcement resonates throughout the program. Expert commentary addresses the broader implications of Kelly's case for cold case investigation and genetic privacy. Legal scholars discuss how DNA databases balance public safety with individual privacy rights in an era of expanding genetic information. The documentary concludes with Kelly's family expressing gratitude for everyone who never stopped working toward resolution. Their final message emphasizes hope for other families still waiting for answers to their own tragedies. Broadcasting the documentary during evening hours reaches Kelly's target audience of true crime enthusiasts and community members invested in justice. The program serves as both memorial and educational tool, ensuring Kelly's story continues teaching important lessons about persistence and hope. Legal experts analyze Kelly's case resolution in academic journals and professional conferences, examining how genetic genealogy has transformed cold case investigation. Their research provides frameworks for other jurisdictions seeking to implement similar technologies. Universities develop curricula based on Kelly's case, teaching students about forensic science, evolution, and investigative persistence. Criminal justice programs use her story to illustrate how technology and human dedication combine to solve seemingly impossible crimes. The case generates scholarly discussion about justice delayed versus justice denied, examining whether resolution without prosecution provides meaningful closure for victims' families. Kelly's story becomes a case study in restorative versus retributive justice concepts. Forensic science textbooks include Kelly's case as an example of evidence preservation, importance, and genetic genealogy application. Students learn how proper evidence collection in 1982 enabled case resolution in 2020, emphasizing long-term thinking in criminal investigation. International law enforcement agencies study Columbus methods for applicability to their own cold cases. Kelly's investigation techniques are adapted for different legal systems and cultural contexts, spreading her impact beyond Ohio borders. Professional conferences feature presentations on Kelly's case, with speakers emphasizing the importance of never abandoning hope for resolution. Her story inspires investigators worldwide to continue working on their own seemingly impossible cases. Research funding increases for genetic genealogy and cold case investigation. Following Kelly's successful resolution, scientific institutions recognize the potential for solving historical crimes through advancing technology and preserved evidence. Legal reforms regarding evidence preservation gain support following Kelly's case demonstration of long-term evidence value. Legislators recognize that today's unsolved crimes may require tomorrow's technology for resolution. The academic examination of Kelly's case ensures that lessons learned from her investigation will influence criminal justice education and practice for generations of future investigators and legal professionals. Detective Dana Kroom sits in her office as evening settles over Columbus, Kelly's photograph resting on her desk beside other unsolved cases, awaiting resolution. The city lights spread beyond her window, illuminating a community forever changed by one child's tragedy and ultimate justice. The small DNA vial that revealed Harold Warren Jarrell's identity sits under laboratory light elsewhere in the building, no longer needed for Kelly's case but preserved as evidence of science's power to resurrect truth from the past. Its contents spoke across 38 years of silence. Kelly's case file rests in the closed drawer, thick with reports that chronicle nearly 4 decades of investigation. The folder represents not just one solved murder, but proof that persistence and advancing technology can overcome seemingly impossible obstacles to justice. Other families still wait for answers that Kelly's family finally received. Detective Kroom carries their hope in every cold case she opens, knowing that somewhere in preserved evidence and advancing science lies the truth they seek. The University District sleeps peacefully tonight, its residents secure in knowing that Kelly's killer has been identified, even though he escaped earthly prosecution. Her voice, silent for decades, finally spoke through evidence that outlasted everyone who failed to protect her. Kellyanne Prosser solved her own murder through DNA that survived when justice could not. Her story proves that truth endures, that evidence preserves, and that time itself can become an ally in the pursuit of answers. The preserved sample sits illuminated under laboratory light, a symbol of persistence and hope. Science and human dedication combine to give voice to the voiceless, justice to the forgotten, and peace to those who never stopped believing that truth would eventually emerge from silence. Kelly's 8-year-old smile beams from the photograph, forever frozen in innocence, yet finally empowered with justice. Her legacy lives in every DNA sample carefully preserved, every cold case reopened, every family that receives answers they thought would never come.